So let's have a look at the questions from discussion board 8. And most of them are about motivation and intrinsic motivation. So the first question, and there's several questions about motivation. So here's Bailey. This chapter in the book mentions that talking about motivation can be tricky, seeing as it's an abstract concept and not very easily explainable. How can I explain to my students that I want them to be intrinsically motivated without using an extrinsic example like candy or prizes to explain the concept of motivation? Well, my suggestion is that I don't think you really need to talk explicitly about motivation with students. Um, if you're talking about it, then it's really extrinsic motivation because you set up a set of teacher expectations, and that's not intrinsic. If they're fulfilling the teacher expectations, then that's extrinsic. So I think that you have to go about working on intrinsic motivation in a way which is not explicit to the class. And how you do that, I'll talk about a little after we look at some other slides with some other questions. So here's Kathryn. In an ideal classroom setting, everyone would be highly motivated to learn the language being taught. In a more realistic classroom setting, how can teacher act as a facilitator and motivator to help students who may otherwise not be as interested in the class to become more motivated and do well? Just to put this into context before we get a response to this, and I'll go on to a response that came in from one of your colleagues, Kathryn. Um, uh, if we put it in the context of English, and English is a foreign language, then most of our students do not have a choice in deciding whether to study English. It is the primary language in the world. It's the language of jobs. It's the language of economics. It's the language which is the most powerful language in the world. So there is no choice. So we have to accept that many of our students are extrinsically motivated. They didn't fall in love with the language. And that's a kind of a privilege that we native English speakers have when we decide to learn Japanese or Italian or Spanish or Russian. We get a hook into the language because we're fascinated by some aspect of the language, the culture, etc. With most people in the world studying English, it's an arranged marriage. So, how can we make the arranged marriage work, or how can we allow for love to grow in a particular arranged, unromantic relationship? Sarah responds to Kathryn. I believe if a student seems unmotivated or uninterested, then the best thing to do is try to get to know them or relate English to their home country. Don't make the class all about learning English, make it about the students as well. I know that in large classes this can be difficult feat, and sometimes you will probably have students that you can not motivate, but trying to relate the language to the students is very important. I think that is great advice, Sarah. It's all about learning about students and getting to know them as much as possible so you can begin to customize your material to their particular needs, personalities, etc. And that in itself is a great way of creating intrinsic motivation because we're appealing to the particular interests and desires and wants of the students themselves. Just to give you a very simple example, you probably come across at the game Find Someone Who. Um, and you have to find someone who speaks a certain language or does this or does that. That's a very personalized pair work communication gap activity, and it can be built upon the way that you collect information about your students. So, for example, if you create a set of cards on the first day of class in which you ask students various questions like what's your favorite color, what countries have you visited, etc., etc. You can take from that information and put it into particular communicative activities like find someone who. And that, so by learning about the student, it helps you create materials which are going to be a lot more motivating for your students. James says, in a classroom setting, students will probably vary significantly in their levels of intrinsic motivation. If some students have particularly low levels of intrinsic motivation while other students have much higher levels, how do you cater to both types of students? What can you do as an instructor without singling these low motivation students out from the rest? Yeah, obviously you're not going to do this on an explicit level, but knowing and following on from what I've said before about getting to know your students, it may be that when you create group and pair work activities, or even seat time individual work, you can pay a bit more attention to those less motivated students. Engage them one-on-one, and you'll be surprised that that kind of one-on-one, that kind of touch, often gets a very good response from students. In my experience teaching in Japan, it was very hard to get students to talk in class. But amazingly, once you're outside of the class, students are only too willing to talk on a one-to-one basis. So it may be trying to create those touches in the classroom with those lesser motivated students is one particular strategy. And you can do that when you create particular pair work, group work, or individual seat work tasks which allow you to do some one-on-one interaction with your students. Anthony says, intrinsic motivation seems like an innate quality with students covering the full range of motivation. Extrinsic motivation can be created, although perhaps ineffectively, through means that everyone can grasp and is readily available to be offered by the teachers, such as by way of praise or candy or gold stars. In a class of perhaps 30 plus students, how do I tap into each student's individual motivational requirements when extrinsic motivation can be offered to the entire class? Some students are simply that lazy and generally do not want to be there. Okay, yeah. You said a few things there, and I've kind of talked about one strategy for responding to particular students who are not intrinsically motivated. But let me just pick up on a couple of things. I don't believe that intrinsic motivation is innate. I think it's part of a particular attraction that we have. If we don't feel that attraction, we don't feel a kind of motivation, right? And that kind of attraction can develop at any particular time. So if you if you compare the building on the metaphor before about romantic love and arranged marriage, it is quite possible that in an arranged marriage, romantic love can develop, right? Of course, may not do either. But so it's not something innate, and it's not something that we as teachers don't have to believe we can't do anything about it, right? Um, and the other extreme there is, of course, you are going to get lazy and students who are not genuinely interested. There always is going to be the disaffected. And in a sense, once you've worked enough with those students and you've come to a realization they are disaffected, and then it's probably time to stop giving your energy to them. As I said, not everybody is in love with learning English. Not everybody wants to be there, and not everyone wants to be in a classroom, right? Institutionalized form of learning. There are plenty of students who are motivated to learn English, but not in a classroom. Okay, and finally, Sarah's got a different type of question. I agree with the constructivist definition of motivation that individuals will react differently to the environments, even when the environment is the same. So how does a teacher make sure that the individual is using their environment and interaction to the fullest, since in this definition, motivation is derived as much from our interactions with others and it is from one's self-determination. So yes, so we had talked about trying to create patterns of interaction between teacher and student, especially those ones who are less intrinsically motivated. And it may also be creating interactions between intrinsically motivated students and those that are not, so that the ones who are not intrinsically motivated can get some appreciation maybe of why that student is so in love with a particular language. And that could be the transmission of a love for music or art or some particular thing that another student can communicate to a less intrinsically motivated student. And in terms of the environment, as I said before, not all students respond to classroom teaching. It's not always easy to get out of the classroom, but there is a chance, always a chance, to create learning situations that attempt to get students out of the classroom or give them assignments for their homework, which get them into other kinds of environments, which they may find more conducive to developing an intrinsic motivation. Finally, Kacie says, what are some steps you take during teaching to keep from throwing the baby out of the bathwater? Well, it's one of the things I've been trying to present and repeating over and over again, and this is the idea that all methods are useful. We don't just throw out one method because now it's the fashion to do another method, and that's the story of English pedagogy, that a method comes along and then it's the old one's thrown out, and then eventually that one will be thrown out. That's the notion of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. There's always something important in any method, and so the reason I've gone through things like grammar translation method and audiolingual method is that there are particular elements in them which are very useful that you need to be aware of and make them part of your repertoire, make them part of your palette, because fundamentally what is going to work in the classroom is based on the kinds of options you have, and you can choose those options based upon the particular context you're working in and who you are as a teacher and the particular needs of the students. And that could encompass lots and lots of different techniques from lots of different methods. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, thanks. And let's look forward to your questions on discussion board 9.